school. Is that a problem for y'all?
Okay, I think we're just about ready to get going. Thank you everyone for coming. I'm going to introduce our guest speaker is Mike Reese, and he is from NCDOT's Congestion Management Unit in Raleigh. He is the Western Regional Engineer, so he does cover the western part of the state, and he's been with DOT for over 20 years and has worked on a lot of projects in the mountains and has extensive experience with safety and congestion management, intersection design. And so, I was also going to mention he grew up in Raleigh, but he has family in the Franklin area, so he's been coming here for most of his life. And again, we've had him speak with our RPO board on access management. I've taken a class with him on highway access and site development design. And he's a wealth of knowledge, so he's going to give us a presentation on roundabouts and have time for questions. So let's give him a warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hope everybody's doing well today. Bring warm wishes for all of you in this part of the state. You've certainly been in my thoughts and prayers with all the wildfires, and I'm so glad to hear that most everything's contained now. But I'm not here to talk about wildfires. I'm here to talk about roundabouts today. So thank you very much. And without further ado, a little bit about modern roundabouts. Everything we do with NCDOT refers back to our mission statement. Everything. Roundabouts, intersections, all of our roadway design, and that is our vision in NCDOT is to be a global leader in providing innovative transportation solutions, and our mission is to connect people, products, and places safely and efficiently with customer-focused accountability, environmental sensitivity to enhance the economy and vitality of North Carolina and our citizens. And Roundabouts does that. So I'll explain in more detail how Roundabouts does that, but I'd like to start talking about the difference between roundabouts and circular intersections, which is all kind of a, roundabout is a subset of circular intersections. So when we talk about traffic circles, what most people think about is, say, Columbus Circle in New York City or the Market House in Fayetteville. We have a few other parts of the state, such as, say, Carthage or Graham, where we have a large destination in the center of a circular intersection. A lot of times these have stop control on entry or signal on entry and other innovations, and I'll explain the differences here momentarily. Or there's intersections, circular intersections for the purpose of traffic calming, such as these. I couldn't begin to imagine where these actually exist, but essentially these are neighborhood roads in which we somebody plopped a circle down in the middle to try to slow traffic down. That's what I mean when I say traffic calming, mainly to slow traffic down through the neighborhood. I had an issue with roads being too straight, which I wouldn't expect in this part of the state too much, but traffic speeding through neighborhoods or maybe going too fast down a hill and just trying to slow traffic down. So when we talk about circular intersections, a lot of time people think about one of those. And then the third category is our modern roundabouts. Modern roundabouts have only been in existence in North Carolina since 1999. And there are big differences between our modern roundabouts and other types of circular intersections. These are two examples, and a lot of my presentation will have examples throughout North Carolina of a lot of these modern roundabouts. So what are some of these differences between modern roundabouts and these traffic calming circles and other types of circular intersections? I'll go into some detail about what some of these are. For one example, this is, I believe, in New York State. A lot of times we talk about roundabouts, especially in my part of the state, a lot of people think, who's been to Pinehurst, maybe golf, Pinehurst? A lot of times people think about, in my area of the state, or in the central part of the state, think about, say, a Pinehurst traffic circle or some location in which there's this huge circular intersection. This particular example is an 800-foot in diameter traffic circle. When we talk about roundabouts, we talk about a much smaller diameter. Not tiny, but normally somewhere in the neighborhood of 120 to 180 feet in diameter is what we're talking about with modern roundabouts. And another big difference between roundabouts and traffic circles is what we call deflection. And that is one of the criteria of a modern roundabout, which is the latest incarnation that Federal Highway Administration has released 2 federally published guides of rules and guidelines on modern roundabouts, and we adhere to those federally established guidelines with all of our modern roundabouts. Again, there's a big difference between modern roundabouts and these other circular types intersections. One of the key criteria is this deflection. What I mean by deflection is there's channelization islands, these small islands on the approach, typically with the traffic circle, the picture on the left, as the motorist approaches the circular intersection, they're heading straight towards the central island, and there aren't too many visual cues to tell the motorist that he needs to turn right to go around the circular intersection. With a modern roundabout, we typically have a 45 to 60 degree angle. We have that deflection on the approach so that it's clear to the motorist that they need to turn right. Another key difference between traffic circles and roundabouts is the intersection control. Some in other parts of the country maybe even have signals on some of the approaches. It's very common to have stop signs on approaches. I know the Market House in downtown Fayetteville, which is their postcard pretty much right in the center of town. Same thing with Carthage and Graham, two other communities that I mentioned before. They all have stop-on approaches. A modern roundabout will have a yield sign on the approach. And notice the appropriate deflection so that it's clear to the motorist that they need to turn right, that they need to yield on entry, and they're yielding to the circulating traffic going around the roundabout. So why would we want to do this? Why roundabouts? Well, we've seen significant safety improvements of roundabouts, especially compared to traffic signals, all movement traffic signals. I'll go into a little bit more detail with each one of these. We're able to get a lot of capacity without a lot of delays, given a set of circumstances. It's good for all modes of traffic. There is some flexibility as far as the intersection geometrics, the physical features of the area, and also beautification, aesthetics and beautification of an area. There's lots of opportunities with roundabouts. Other than some of the circles I showed before, which are in other parts of the country, almost all of the roundabout pictures that are in this presentation are North Carolina examples. This is actually Ocean Isle Beach near Wilmington. This was a roundabout that was put in some years ago on an NC highway. So a little bit about safety. One of the things that we as transportation engineers look at is conflict points. Conflict points is when two streams of traffic are fighting for the same space at the same time. When you have what we would call, the picture on the left, an all-movement intersection. Each one of these four approaches, traffic could be going left or through or right. And they're having to yield to all the other approaches that are turning left or through or right. If you add up each one of those potential collision locations, there are 32 possible conflict points with an all-movement intersection. So let's say that one on the left, traffic's increasing, and let's say it's stop controlled or some other form of traffic control, and we put in a traffic signal. We haven't done much to help the safety with that in most cases by putting the signalization in. Because by putting that red light, everybody's definitely going to stop as soon as we put that red light in, correct? Not necessarily. So with a all-movement intersection, 32 possible conflict points fighting for that same amount of space in the center of the intersection, and that's where we have a lot of those T-bone 90-degree type crashes, and those are the most severe crashes. Notice with the roundabout picture on the right, we've reduced the number of conflict points from 32 to 8 conflict points. And even with those conflict points, they're not those 90-degree T-bone type conflict points. They're more yielding. There's 4 converging and 4 diverging or exiting conflict points, so they're much more minor. So if we happen to have a few crashes at a roundabout, what we've seen historically, as I'll show you on the next slide, is roundabouts have much fewer crashes compared to an all-movement signalized intersection, but the crashes we do have are much less severe with roundabouts. So here's some of the safety criteria in the United States, and this data is a little bit dated. And again, as I have said, we are always, as a transportation engineering community, we're always trying to improve upon our designs and our standards to try to further reduce crashes. In North Carolina, NCDOT, we're a Vision Zero state, which means we are not satisfied until 0 lives are lost on our highways nationally each year. And we're not going to be satisfied until we reach that goal. So in looking at the safety criteria, again, this is a little outdated, I apologize for that, but in North Carolina from 1999, that first roundabout that we installed, which happened to be in the Winston-Salem area, in those first 7 years, Conversion from stop to sign control, we reduced crashes 41%. Conversion from a signal, we reduced it to 74%. And here's some nationally recognized criteria. Total crashes dropped 50%. Fatal injury crashes in rural areas dropped 80%, and urban areas 60%. And if I were to update these with some more modern statistics, you would see that trend is continuing as we've tried to improve our geometric designs nationally. So what about capacity, the ability to move traffic, the mobility? Peak hour traffic is usually at least as efficient. Off-peak is usually much more efficient than traffic signals. The main thing to think of is if you put in a traffic signal, a traffic light, traffic comes up in the middle of the night, they have to stop, even when there's no traffic coming. With a roundabout, if it works as it's intended, traffic is continuously flowing. So it's more efficient. Multi-lane roundabouts can handle as much traffic as a busy signalized intersection given a set of circumstances. So what about different modes? Because with DOT, we're not just about moving cars and buses. We're also about transit, pedestrians, bicyclists, all modes of transportation. We have complete streets policies at NCDOT within the state that we have adopted that requires that we accommodate all modes of transportation through our road network. Pedestrians is we provided a safer crossing for pedestrians. Think about if we have two busy thoroughfares that are intersecting and we have a traffic signal in between. Traditionally, we keep adding more lanes, right? That's how we solve that congestion. As we keep adding more lanes, what does that do for the pedestrian? Gives them more exposure and more lanes to have to go across. And you saw the conflict point diagram I showed a minute ago. With pedestrians, they're able to cross the individual approaches one at a time. And we typically will have the crosswalk on the approach. Nobody goes to the center island, which is one reason why we wouldn't want to put a courthouse or some other kind of tourist attraction in the middle, because we don't want pedestrians in the center. We want pedestrians to go along the outside. And it's essentially the same concept with bicyclists. Bicyclists can either claim the lane, because they are a vehicle, and drive the same way they would a car, or they could use these same crosswalks going across the approaches and the departure of the roundabout. Buses. This one happens to be not too far from my house. This is at NC State University, which is one of the first roundabouts in the Raleigh area that was put in about 10 years ago. Don't have much trouble negotiating the roundabout as long as we have a good location for bus stops. The picture on the right shows a bus stop a little ways beyond the roundabout. We certainly wouldn't want a bus stop to be in the middle of the circulating lanes in the roundabout. A little bit about geometrics. This is at an interchange. This one is in Winston-Salem, which was, these were two of the first 10 or so roundabouts that were put in. Notice the bridge in the center. This is what we would call a diamond interchange, just a standard diamond interchange on a freeway just outside of Winston-Salem. The problem was this is a two-lane bridge. When you have a diamond interchange, you have left turns going in either direction that are fighting for the same amount of space. And traffic was backing up on both approaches across this bridge. The bridge had quite a few years of life left in it, so the plan was, well, let's widen the bridge. Let's replace the bridge because we need more room for lanes. By putting in these roundabouts, we were able to save that bridge and save taxpayers a lot of money by putting that bridge in, plus we're enjoying those safety and capacity benefits by putting the roundabouts in. And then we're much better for maintenance as well. Long-term costs, which I'm going to show here in the next slide or two. A little bit more about geometric flexibility. Look at the picture on the left. This was what we would call offset T intersections. Two very closely spaced intersections. Roundabouts don't have to be round. They can be oblong. And we're able to appreciate those same safety and efficiency benefits. So we have one in the Wilmington area that's actually peanut-shaped, where we have multiple roads coming in, and then they're just all right in, right out, yield on entry. The same roundabout rules apply. Notice there's a common theme with all of these. Yield on entry, splitter islands, pedestrians outside of the central area, one-way pattern, always going counterclockwise flow. So here's a little bit about beautification efforts. This one's on Duke University campus. Even though we don't want pedestrians to go to the central island of the roundabout, that doesn't mean that we can't have beautification efforts inside of the island of the roundabout. So it's very common to have statues. In Florida, there's a few roundabouts with fountains. And other amenities in the center. Main thing is we just don't want to have pedestrians in the center. And you've seen this one before, landscaping. This one is in Indiana, big shot, right? So you can guess why they would do this. Looks great from the air. I'm not real sure why they would want to do this on the road. It just looks like flowers. They didn't ask me. This one is not in the United States. This one is in the Netherlands. And this is like a UFO landing area. I don't know if I would advocate for UFOs landing in the middle of our roundabouts, but I guess they do that there. What do we hear from the public? So even we as engineers and all of us in this room, we can appreciate, I hope we could all appreciate the benefits that we see out of roundabouts, but what are some of the common complaints and questions that we hear from the public? Usually it's driver expectation is, oh, they're going to put me in circles, I'm never going to be able to get out. I'm sure a lot of folks, we were talking about this during lunch, Chevy Chase, National Lampoon's Vacation, Little Kids, Big Men, Parliament, you know, you're just stuck in the middle, you're never able to get out. Large trucks. Large trucks, oh, these roundabouts, I've actually heard them called roundy thingies. I actually have heard that in a public meeting before. These roundabout things, trucks can't negotiate them. Trucks can't go through them, which actually is not true, as I'll show you in a slide coming up. Or it's too expensive and we can't maintain it. It's easier to maintain a signal than a roundabout. That's definitely not true. And what about emergency vehicle access? Fire trucks, ambulances, other emergency vehicles, they can't turn left, they have to go around the roundabout. Well, there's ways in which we can accommodate that as well, of course. So this graphic kind of gives an idea of the driver expectations. They're going to put me in circles. I've got this circle coming up. I'm never going to be able to get out. And obviously, that's not true. And even though I don't have slides specifically getting into multi-lane roundabouts, but a lot of it comes down to design, that we as engineers are trying to improve upon our designs so that Chevy Chase, if he does happen to go through one of our modern roundabouts, he won't get stuck in the middle and have to see Big Ben and Parliament over and over again. And a lot of it is public information, getting information out to the public. I did bring some pamphlets today. I have some NCDOT public outreach materials here on roundabouts. That includes a lot of the material that I'm going through today, as well as some federal highway pamphlets on roundabouts. And I'll just leave these up here at the table. And these are available online as well, and I can provide those links if needed. So let's talk about costs. This is very rough, very rudimentary, but the typical cost for a single-lane, four-leg roundabout construction is normally in the neighborhood of about $600,000. The main thing is with that roundabout, you have that relatively high initial cost, but your maintenance is minimal. You have some mowing perhaps in the center and some maintaining the landscaping, but it's relatively minimal, especially compared to that signal maintenance. If the loop wire gets cut at a traffic signal, having to maintain the signal heads and all the wiring and the cabinet and the hardware that goes in with the signal, typically you're talking up to somewhere around $5,000 annually. Signalized intersection costs are about $100,000. So a lot of folks will look at this and say, $600,000 to $100,000. Slammed up, let's put in a signal. And again, I explained about the safety and efficiency benefits. A lot of times when I see a traffic signal, an all-movement intersection, we normally need to start adding turn lanes. And that's where our cost really starts going up. That plus the long-term maintenance costs. In the longer term, we're much cheaper to go with a roundabout in most cases. Emergency vehicles. Emergency vehicles, which really goes along the same lines as trucks as well, is that roundabouts are designed to accommodate these larger vehicles. One of the common features of all modern roundabouts is this central island, this apron. A lot of times, some of our initial designs, it actually looked like a sidewalk. Well, as I discussed before, we do not want pedestrians in the center, so we don't want it to look like a sidewalk. Notice this one, it's actually stamped concrete. It's red. That is a mountable central island. That's what we call an apron. That is to accommodate large vehicles, trucks, emergency vehicles from being able to go all the way around the roundabout and negotiate it safely and efficiently. So again, it goes down to the appropriate design. For some of our smaller roundabouts, there's another category of roundabouts called mini roundabouts that for the sake of time I won't go into information today, but they're more in neighborhood areas where we're down around 90-foot total diameters, where the central island can be only an apron and larger vehicles could actually traverse the middle. Again, those are more for lower volume roadways, smaller communities, certainly not thoroughfares. So in North Carolina, starting with that first modern roundabout that we installed in 1999, we now have over 250 roundabouts. Those are state-maintained roundabouts. There are many, many others that are in subdivisions, retail developments throughout the state that are not state-maintained. The majority of the roundabouts in the state are single lane with 4 approaches, although we do have some multi-lane roundabouts in North Carolina right now, or single lane roundabouts with right turn lanes. Multi-lane roundabouts, as well as roundabouts, they're becoming more acceptable as folks are getting used to driving them. In some of our more populous areas of the state, or areas where there's a lot more roundabouts, people are a lot more accepting than areas that don't have any roundabouts. Of course, we do have roundabouts in this part of the state, but I could understand going to an area in which there are no roundabouts yet. We have to get stronger with the public outreach component and getting more information out on how to drive these. The yield on entry and some of these other criteria that I discussed before. We're seeing more up in downtown areas, especially those mini roundabouts. There have been areas in which we've studied signalized intersections along a corridor that we've investigated having mini roundabouts. Larger vehicles could pretty much go through. We would be just the central island, but your regular conventional vehicles would go around the island. The interchange ramps, like I discussed before, and all of our 14 state highway divisions have at least one roundabout in operation, and most have many. Here's a map showing where the concentration of our roundabouts are. Most of the roundabouts in the state, out of those 250, are in the Greensboro, Winston-Salem, the Raleigh-Durham area, and the Charlotte area. But we have a good cluster out here in western North Carolina as well. So I'll close with a couple of pictures of a few single-lane and multi-lane roundabouts in North Carolina. This was the very first modern roundabout that we installed in 1999 in Clemens, which is just outside of Winston-Salem. Notice the channelization islands go back a little further. You can notice the deflection, but there have been improvements in a lot of our designs with the deflection since. This is also near a school. Also notice it's not too far from a railroad crossing. This is the one at NC State. I showed a picture of this before. There's also 2 other roundabouts along this corridor in West Raleigh, and I live pretty much on the outskirts of the Raleigh area, but I do go to NC State fairly frequently. As was mentioned, I teach a few classes at NC State, and in cutting across campus, there used to be multiple traffic signals you had to get across. And when you have a traffic light and traffic volumes grow, and have you ever pulled up to a light and you see it turn green, and you creep up a couple of cars, and then you see it turn red, so you have to wait multiple cycles to get through. So with these 3 roundabouts, that easily cut 10 minutes off my time to go just a couple of miles from one side of campus to the other. And I'm hearing very similar stories to this with roundabout installations throughout the state. We do have quite a few roundabout corridors where we've taken out multiple signals and installed roundabouts. And one of the things I failed to mention before is what we do in congestion management at its core is the capacity analysis, the mobility analysis, to make sure that at least 10 years, ideally 20 years into the future, that roundabout will not break down, will not queue back, and that we have enough lanes to be able to accommodate traffic, not just today, but well into the future. Because we don't, as NCDOT, we certainly do not want to install a roundabout, and then some large development comes in 3 or 4 years later, and we need to try something else. One of the things we have done is maybe in 20 years, we need a large multi-lane roundabout, but we can get by with a single lane for the next 10 years, as we'll build a roundabout with a larger footprint, but open it up to a single lane operation in the interim until we need those additional lanes. Here's another example in the eastern part of North Carolina, the single lane roundabout. This one has a bypass lane that goes around. A few examples of multi-lane roundabouts. The one on the left is in the Wilmington area, a little town called Castlehane, which is not far from the Division 3 NCDOT office. Notice what's on the aerial on the left You see Garden Place, Castle Hayne Road, which is US Highway 117, NC Highway 133, and Bowman Street. All these roads, as well as fire and rescue, all converging on that one area. And what you see in the superimposed picture there, it's only been open to traffic maybe a year or two. I don't think the aerial photography's caught up to this yet. I do have some on-the-ground pictures of this one if anybody wants to see it. But that's now that peanut-shaped oblong roundabout. It also has a few driveways and access to it as well. The one on the right was one of the first multi-lane roundabouts in North Carolina. And this demonstrates what I was talking about the spiraling effect, or the Chevy Chase not getting stuck in the middle. Look, kids, Big Bend Parliament. Notice there's a single lane on the right-hand side. So as two lanes coming around, this is very close to Old Salem, if anybody's familiar with that area in Winston-Salem. You see where the vehicle is, the pickup carrying the trailer in the top right part of the screen. With appropriate design, it would push that motorist to the outside. So Chevy Chase wouldn't be able to be stuck in the middle. Look here at Big Bend Parliament and be stuck in all day long. Again, other things that we've learned with geometry to improve the operations of these roundabouts. And here's one more picture. This one is just outside of the Charlotte area in Davidson. This is very close to I-77, and this basically is the downtown corridor going through Davidson, North Carolina. So with that, right on time? Any questions? Yes, sir.
Does the DOT fund these, or will they do one with a local match? Or what's the fiscal impact?
That would be a question that I can't necessarily answer. That would be more of a division question. But given a set of conditions, we certainly coordinate with local governments to make infrastructure improvements. And there's been many times in which we've done a match to get infrastructure improvements in place, especially for safety and mobility.
Most of these are just part of a standard, project that would go through the normal prioritization process, and if it were the highest ranking scoring. And intersection projects tend to have a decent score, at least as the methodology is now.
There are other funding mechanisms that we have. We have in addition to the normal TIP process, we have spot safety funds that are available. If we have a crash pattern at, say, an all-moving intersection where we have a significant amount of those T-bone 90-degree type crashes. We also have spot mobility funds, and we have ways in which we can evaluate that within my group as requested. The other criteria is there are other roundabouts that we've had installed through developments. So if we have development in the area that's adding a significant amount of traffic to an intersection, there's been many times in which we recommended roundabouts be installed, either fully or in part by developers.
What is the general speed entering a roundabout that you're showing us? 25
miles an hour is typical design speed for a roundabout. That's the circulating speed. One of the more common misconceptions we hear, not so much recently, especially in areas where we've had a lot of roundabouts in place, is people failing to yield. Either going straight through or treating it like a stop sign. And that's where a lot of the motorist information, handing out flyers in areas that may not have folks familiar with it. But with the yield on entry, as folks get used to them, they operate much better.
Well, I'm from Cashers, and there has been a great deal of discussion about replacing our intersection with a roundabout. In the height of our season, we will have traffic backed up at least a mile in each direction. It just seems that a single lane roundabout would be sort of ridiculous with a backup of 1 mile in 4 directions. And can you sort of address this, the volume? I see these all over the country, and particularly in North Carolina, in as you say, it's right outside so-and-so. It's just on the outskirts of so-and-so, but in an urban, walkable village. I'd like some input from you on that. And also, the traffic never stops. A roundabout is designed to be continually moving with no stops, no rhythm to let people cross. How does one cross a roundabout with that kind of volume that never stops?
Both excellent questions. To answer your first question about the urban context, we have had quite a few roundabouts in urban context. The one that I showed a minute ago at NC State, it's like 2 miles from downtown Raleigh, Hillsborough Street, right in the heart of NC State campus, and we have 3 major roundabouts through there. So we've also had major corridors with significant amounts of roundabouts. It also gives a lot of opportunities for those aesthetic improvements that I was mentioning before as well. And to address your pedestrian comment, I'll also address your capacity comment as well. As far as pedestrians, given a set of circumstances where there is a significant amount of pedestrian activity, we have looked at mid-block crosswalks. There has been multiple studies out about having signalized crosswalks on some of the approaches to roundabouts just for pedestrians based on actuation. And then there's other ways to get pedestrians across as well, roads I'm sure that you're familiar with. Rapid flashing beacons and hawk signals and things like that, especially mid-block. As far as capacity, to address the queuing and spillback concerns that you had addressed, that all comes through my group as well as the division office in running the analysis numbers. So in your area, sir, I'm sure probably like leaf season or maybe the middle of the summer is probably where you experience the significant backups. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so what we would want to do is get some traffic counts in that area during that time, if we haven't already, and then run that analysis to make sure that we have enough lanes to be able to accommodate that peak demand with the roundabout in place. And if we don't, then maybe we would need to consider some other kind of intersection.
And it seems that the movement is that a roundabout is a fix-all, and it's appropriate for every situation. Are there situations where it is not appropriate?
That is a true statement, yes. It depends on the criteria for a given location. One of the criteria is, for example, we would not want to put a roundabout on a 5% grade. We wouldn't want a roundabout to be, the road's coming down like this and then you have a roundabout. We would want to have a certain degree of flat. Also, if we have very high volumes, we were actually just talking about this before my presentation. There's criteria in which a single lane roundabout wouldn't work. We might need dual lane roundabouts. I showed the picture of bypass lanes. So it sounds like in this situation, we would definitely want to analyze for that peak traffic and make sure that we're not experiencing those traffic backups during those peak travel times. If we haven't done that already. So it sounds like we haven't. So best first call I would make is contact the division office. The way my group in congestion management operates is we work on the request of local officials and division offices and that sort of thing to provide these analyses. So I would start with the division office and then we could perform analysis as requested. Does that answer?
Thank you.
Well,
so what is the average diameter necessary to do a one-lane roundabout?
single lane roundabouts, typically we're looking at a central island diameter of about 90 feet. And then another 15, 16 feet for the single circulating lane. So rule of thumb, normally we start somewhere around 120 feet. Multi-lane roundabouts, typically 150 up to 180 feet. Based on what we have seen throughout the state, if you have an island that's too small, you're not giving the approaching motorist enough time to be able to see the traffic on the approaching quadrant. So normally 120 feet is where we start, unless we have a mini roundabout, which is really a different criteria altogether. For instance, such as your situation, sir, I certainly wouldn't consider a mini roundabout there. Mini roundabouts are typically more, certainly not NC highways or major thoroughfares, but more for smaller communities, residential communities.
And the ones at state took 8 minutes off my commute, so thank you.
Oh, great, great. I'm glad to hear it. Yes, sir.
Oh, I was just going to say thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Any other questions? Or?
Thank you so much, Mike. I hate to do it. We double booked the room today, and it's my fault. Like everything else that happens in town, it's my fault. But no, I just wanted to say thank you, and I want to say this is a great turnout today. We hope that this program of the mayor's group will continue under the umbrella of Region A and Sarah and Rose and Tara. Russ, I'll get it right in a minute.
Mr. Harrison's my father.
Yeah, well, that was mine. But we do want this group to grow, and whenever we're having this meeting, feel free to bring board members or whoever, because I think that we always have somebody like Mike that is going to bring us a message that really applies to towns. And we're so appreciative that you drove up from Raleigh.
And to add something, just to say about Mike, it's good to know that DOT considers alternative solutions. I think what oftentimes we hear, a project is coming along and we see sort of the standards and we think that that's going to happen to our community. And Mike's been real helpful in several of our communities and talking like with the Winter 7 Corridor Study about when you have geographical constraints or, you know, when you have things in your community that make a certain solution difficult, DOT is willing to work with communities to find a solution. So thank you for continuing to give us attention when we ask for it and help us learn that there are other ways rather than just widening and affecting business.
I can verify of all the public meetings I've been to, we read each and every public comment and respond to it.
Yeah. So thank you, Mike, for coming out yet again. Yeah.
My pleasure.
Mike, y'all may already do this. If you don't, since there are a number of places now that do have roundabouts, like Paige was riding on hers and I love ours. You know, I don't know if I'd be willing to drive to Wilmington, but you know, if you were going to have public hearings in places, and I think you could gather a list of places that would be willing to come and speak from real world experience. For those doubters that have really never experienced it before. I'd be glad to testify.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys coming down from the high country. Yeah, I know the intersection exactly what you're talking about.